How the hell did I end up here? Helen Roberts, a respectable suburban housewife and mother of two, sat at the bar, watching the other patrons of a country house that doubled as a swingers club. She felt like she didn't belong here. Everyone else looked younger, much younger than her 38 years, and in her eyes they all looked much more glamorous. She didn't want to be here. It was Dave, her husband's idea. He sat next to her, looking as confident as ever. He pestered her for months before she reluctantly agreed to join a swingers dating site, which led to their first time here at the club. The fact that Dave's affair had brought them to this point added to her discomfort. When discovered, he asked for forgiveness before admitting that he needed more than Helen could offer, and then finally suggesting that they explore new things together. Helen's love for her children was the main consideration that prevented her from immediately walking out the door and going to divorce court. He eventually convinced her to visit the website and download the application. Their profiles were separate, but showed a link to each other and classified them as swingers. All participants could then swipe right on Dave's or Helen's data to indicate interest. What was different from other dating sites was that the results weren't revealed to the participants until the swingers unification event they were attending that evening. Helen looked through the men's profiles, indicating who she liked. She found it difficult without face-to-face meetings. Based on appearance alone, she would probably say yes to most of them, but ruled out many on the basis that the profiles sounded too arrogant. The site enabled private messages, and Helen received some complimentary comments and recommendations, but wasn't sure how to respond, so she just left them. There seemed to be about 20 couples in attendance, invited as a result of the website's algorithms producing an equal number of matches. The instructions stated that everyone must carry a mobile phone with the Swingers Club app downloaded to it. They could attend from 7 p.m., the app published likes at 8 p.m. Participants then had to spend 30 minutes with their counterparts before deciding whether they wanted to pair up and retire to the ground floor, which was guarded by a pair of burly guards. Those who connected had until 10 p.m. to spend it with their new partners, or they could return earlier. They were then free to drink, meet others, or continue the party. Helen again wondered why Dave was so insistent on this. He was usually popular with women, and he knew it. Was it about the freedom and exploration he described, or just a dirty way for him to have sex with another blonde without the risk of getting caught this time? While getting ready, she hesitated for the 100th time, completely unsure of what to wear. Dave was clearly very excited, in contrast to her own feelings of fear. He confirmed that they should go and encouraged her to be bolder, suggesting a red satin dress with a plunging neckline that already seemed a little tight, as well as matching stilettos. The dress was paired with lingerie that flattered her figure, in the form of a vintage 1950s-style open hem girdle with suspenders and nude stockings. She looked in the mirror and surprised herself by thinking that she looked pretty good, and it was nice to dress up for a change. She couldn't remember the last time she dressed like that, or when she was taken out on a date, for that matter. A clutch bag and a thin silver shawl completed the outfit. They arrived shortly after 7, checked in with the receptionist, who made sure the app worked on both of their phones. The application was connected to several large screens located in the main public areas and bars. The instructions stated that the 3 male and 3 female contestants with the most likes would be announced on the screens at 7:30 p.m., and the likes match would be announced at 8 p.m. Helen was completely stunned to see her picture appear on the big screens at 7:30 a.m. It took a while to realize she had come in 3rd place. She thought that the women standing above her both looked like models, as did all 3 of the chosen guys. She blushed as people suddenly seemed to stare at her. The guy sitting next to her at the bar smiled and congratulated her. Helen muttered, "It must be a mistake." He shook his head. "I don't think so. But the other girls are stunning and much younger." "Nonsense," he snapped. "You're gorgeous, a little older, but you have amazing curves. Your butt may be a little bigger than when you were younger, but it's the perfect peach shape. Your long legs and big breasts are simply irresistible." Helen blushed. She was both flattered and offended, but she was in a swingers club, so there was no point in getting upset. She couldn't deny that she felt pretty good about this situation. The fact that Dave wasn't one of the top 3 men added to her sense of satisfaction. The top 3 were followed by confirmation that awards would be announced via the app at 8 p.m. A looping background message displayed on the screens gave a detailed description of the matching algorithm. All were ranked based on the number of likes on the website. The algorithm started with the first-ranked woman going through her list of liked men present that evening to find the highest-ranked man who, in turn, liked her profile. So, a number 1 rated woman can be linked to a 1-1 rated man, but only if they have both swiped on each other's profiles. If not, the algorithm will pair her with the next oldest man, excluding her own partner, and so on until all pairs are matched. Because of the conflicts and coincidences, it sounded complicated. It is not surprising that an algorithm was needed, and the organizers must have specially selected the invitees to make it all work. Dave seemed a little upset that his wife's high ranking didn't boost his score, but on the other hand, he was confident in the selection, and all the women in attendance looked hot. He thought it was a good idea. He really should have tried this years ago. Helen glanced nervously at her phone for the 100th time. Just as the time approached 8 p.m., a message appeared. "Congratulations, you matched with John." A photo of her date appeared, and Helen gulped, looking at the screen. She saw man number 1 both on her and on the big screen. Dave tore his eyes away from his mate, a pretty redhead named Marion, to check on Helen. He looked a little puzzled when he realized who Helen had a mutual crush on. Subsequent messages showed the floor plan to guide people to their appointments. Helen stood up on shaky legs to go look for her mate, but was taken by surprise when she was greeted by an unusually handsome man. "Hello, you must be Helen. I'm John." He leaned over and kissed her on the cheek. He smelled simply divine. Helen felt herself blush before she came to her senses and said hello properly. She noticed Dave eyeing her suspiciously before heading off to find his mate. John brought them both drinks, and they sat back down at the bar. She didn't know how to start a conversation. "I don't understand how you ended up paired with me. I mean, you're number 1. "Oh, that's easy to explain," John answered calmly. "The woman who took first place is my wife Danielle, and I had no liking for the woman who took second place, so you were my best match. I only liked 3 women out of the entire list, and I must have been one of your likes." "You chose me?" Helen muttered. "Of course, you were my first choice," John smiled. "But why me? I mean, everyone else looks so charming and so young." John looked genuinely confused. "You have no idea, do you?" "What? How glamorous you look, and the fact that you have no idea makes you even more beautiful." Helen blushed again. This was becoming a habit for her. "Flatterer, you've already done this before. Actually, we've only been here a couple of times. I prefer real women. I don't really like skeleton blondes and fake breasts. They would simply be poorer versions of my wife Danielle. You are gorgeous. All your curves, you have that classic hourglass look. I love it." "Oh, right. Well, I'm not sure what I can say other than thank you." John shamelessly looked over her body from head to toe, stopping his gaze on her legs, chest, and, finally, on her face. "No need, and I'm really glad you chose me." Having said this, John leaned forward and placed his hand on Helen's thigh. This reminded her that she was wearing stockings, and he was touching them. She began to panic. John noticed this immediately and removed his hand. He looked at her curiously for several moments. "As I understand it, this is your first time at the club, and it wasn't your idea." Helen was surprised that he had guessed this from his appearance, but nodded in agreement. "Well, yes. Sorry if that was a little rash. Just relax. We don't have to do anything that you don't want to do. This is our general choice. At worst, we enjoy a drink together and then go our separate ways without any hard feelings. If we stay together for a while, we won't do anything you don't like, and you can still leave at any time." Helen felt the tension ease and forced a smile. "Thank you. This is important for me." To be honest, it wasn't my idea either, but Danielle really likes it. Helen was surprised. "Really?" "Yeah, I'd rather have a couple of quiet beers in the pub and spend the night with my wife, but it could be fun, and at least I know where she is and what she's up to. Helen was going to ask more, but it was similar to her situation with Dave, and she didn't want to get into sensitive topics. 30 minutes flew by quickly. Their conversation was relaxed and exciting. At 8:30, the application checked the messages. Participants were required to press an accept or decline button on their phone for the appointment. Helen looked at John, asking, "What is your choice?" He laughed. "I've already voted and I can't tell you." Helen clicked accept. Then the app showed avatars of her and John holding hands, and then a collar was added to both of their characters. She looked up nervously. John smiled. "I'm very happy and flattered, thank you very much." "Likewise," was all Helen could get out before she felt her face turn red again. John stood up and extended his hand to her. She took it. As she stood up, John pulled her towards him for a kiss. It was a quick touch of lips. Helen felt a little dizzy. Breaking the kiss, he led Helen to the stairs. She quickly looked around for Dave but couldn't see him, so she assumed he was doing the same thing she was doing. In fact, Dave was trying to make his way through the crowd of people heading towards the stairs. Finally, he spotted Helen on the first-floor landing, smiling and holding hands with a tall and very handsome man. He headed towards the stairs but was stopped by a security guard who said there were only couples there. Helen disappeared when the guard sent him back to the bar. His meeting with Marion did not go according to plan. She seemed to want a romantic encounter, while Dave was looking for rough, uncomplicated sex. However, it came as a surprise when after he clicked accept, the app showed two sliding icons and a sad face between them. A message appeared. "Please return to the bar. We hope you have better luck there." It took him a while to realize that he had been rejected. He then tried to convince Marion to change her mind. By then, he missed Helen. At least he still had a chance. He returned to the bar. It was clear that some of the people in the bar were real couples who had decided not to go through the algorithm. He struck up a conversation with an attractive brunette, but noticed that she was looking at another guy across the bar. A few smiles and nods later, she briefly apologized and left. He tried to chat with the remaining women there, but it was obvious that they were not interested. He checked the application, which confirmed his conclusion: all matches are currently accepted. He felt sick to his stomach, ordered whiskey, and wondered how Helen was doing. Only 30 minutes had passed since the coincidence, and he had at least another hour to wait. In fact, it was another 2 hours before he saw Helen again. Helen's time with John was nothing short of revelatory. From the moment they walked out onto the stairs hand in hand, it was something. John's touch was electric, and he was so beautiful that she could feel the bulge of his biceps as they held hands. She usually found guys staring at her breasts annoying, but John could stare as much as he wanted. He maintained eye contact with Helen, and she wondered if he could see her anticipation and excitement. She expected sex to be the same as her husband usually demanded. She was completely confused when John sat down on the couch with her. They talked some more while finishing their drinks. They then spent what seemed like an eternity, fully clothed, kissing. Even before she took off her clothes, Helen was excited with anticipation. John stood in front of her and slowly began to undress. She was delighted with his perfect figure. Then he asked her to take off her clothes for him. Helen was not used to undressing under such close attention. Her shawl already off, she reached back and unzipped her dress, holding it to her chest before finally letting go and letting it fall to her feet. Standing in her girdle, stockings, and heels, she suddenly felt very naked and at the same time old-fashioned as she looked at Adonis standing in front of her, who looked as if he had been carved from marble. She thought he was joking when he said, "Wow, you're stunning." But he didn't laugh, continuing to say, "Don't take off your underwear, they're so damn hot." What happened next shocked her. She had never experienced such feelings with her husband. Helen was so overwhelmed by the new sensations that engulfed her body that she was afraid she might lose consciousness. Together, They reached the final climax more than once. Did they have sex or make love? Helen wasn't sure, but it was definitely more than sex. There was connection, feelings, and emotions. She had no idea it could feel this good. Unlike Dave, John was very attentive and gentle, ensuring that they both had equal pleasure. It was such a contrast with her husband, who always felt like he was taking something away from her. She found herself comparing her husband to John, and the comparison was not at all flattering to Dave. After a long period of affectionate hugging, they eventually stood up and began to get dressed. Helen found herself smiling at what they had just done, while John watched them part with something akin to regret. "I have to see you again." Helen hesitated. They were both married. "I don't know if that's such a good idea. I mean, it was so good and intense that it could get out of control." The best description, which Helen refrained from, was that it was nothing short of a revelation. She wanted more, but she was pretty sure it would end her marriage, if it wasn't already. They got dressed and left the room, Helen doing her best to rebuff John's pleas to see her again. As they walked along the first floor, several men were clearly eyeing Helen. John's requests continued. He suggested they just meet for coffee as friends and talk. She must have felt the same connection as he did. By this time, Helen's brain felt like it was close to shutting down due to emotional overload. She needed to find Dave. Returning to the common room, they found a clearly drunk Dave leaning against the bar. "Oh, here she comes," Dave mumbled. "The stray slut is back. Did you have a good time, honey, with your boy toy?" Helen was both embarrassed and furious, hissing, "This was all your idea, and I haven't done anything that you haven't already done, many times, I might add. And he's 10 years older than your last girlfriend. We're leaving now before you make an even bigger fool of yourself." Dave was muttering and seemed close to fainting when Helen turned to see John standing nearby looking worried. "Sorry, John. I think this was all a terrible mistake. We need to go." John limped. "It's not a mistake for me, Helen. It's the best experience I've ever had. I hope you and your husband can work things out. Good luck." She cast one last long, wistful look at John, then half-pulled, half-held Dave out of the club while he muttered comments about how it was all a rig. It was a damn stupid system, and they would never come back here. Helen and Dave's relationship quickly deteriorated after their trip to the club. All of Dave's shortcomings became increasingly obvious, aggravated by his drinking. Constantly sullen and belligerent, Dave often shouted at the children and began calling Helen obscene names. He accused her of treason and threatened to kill both her and her imaginary lover. The situation escalated to such an extent that Helen returned to her parents to provide a more stable family life for the children and divorced 6 months later. It was on the day that her divorce was finalized that Helen checked out an old swingers dating site. It seemed like a lifetime had passed since they uploaded the profiles. She was about to delete her profile when she noticed that her inbox was full of messages. She noticed more than 40 emails from one source, from a man whose profile was no longer linked to Danielle, his apparent ex-wife. Helen deleted her own link to Dave's profile and thought about replying to the last message. "Dear John, please like and subscribe to the channel and you will never be cheated on."